The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler, November 24th, St. Albert of Louvain, Martyr. In the 12th century, the noble houses of Brabant and Hainaut constantly disputed the large and powerful Diocese of Liège. The bishop of that see necessarily exercised great influence on the politics of his time. It was precisely the abusive but common practice of using a see as a political instrument that led to the violent death of Albert of Louvain. He was born in 1116. He was the son of Godfrey, Duke of Brabant, and Margaret of Limburg. He spent his childhood in the castle that his father had in the hill of Louvain that is now called Mont César, where there is a well-known Benedictine abbey. From a very young age, Albert was chosen for the clerical state. At the age of 12, he was made a canon of Liège, but at the age of 21, the young man renounced that benefice and asked Baldwin V, Count of Hainaut, to give him the knighthood. Baldwin agreed and sent him to fight his enemies. Given what happened afterwards, we can assume that Albert intended to leave for the Crusade. Indeed, when Cardinal Henry of Albano, papal legate, preached the Crusade in Liège a few months later, one of those who took up the cross was Albert. But around the same time, he embraced the clerical life and received his canonry again. We do not know what caused this curious incident. What is certain is that Alberto never went to the East, neither as a soldier nor as a cleric. The following year, he was named Archdeacon of Brabant, and other dignities followed. However, although Albert was archdeacon and provost by office, he had only received the subdiaconate. In 1191, the Bishop of Liège died. The two candidates for succession were both named Albert. Both were archdeacons, and neither was a priest. The other was Albert of Rathil Deacon, cousin of Baldwin of Hainaut, and uncle of Empress Constance, wife of Henry IV. A chronicler of the time says that many dukes, counts, and men-at-arms attended the election, which took place in Liège, but Albert of Louvain was clearly the most qualified candidate, and the chapter elected him by an overwhelming majority. Albert of Rathil then appealed to his kinsman, the emperor, who was an enemy of Albert of Louvain's brother, Henry of Brabant. The emperor summoned both parties to Worms. Practically all the clergy of Liège were in favor of St. Albert, while only a minority of canons supported Albert of Rathil. But the emperor, instead of ruling in favor of one of the two, announced that he had granted the see to the provost of Bonn Lotarius, whom he had just appointed imperial chancellor in exchange for 3,000 marks. St. Albert calmly told the emperor that his election was canonically valid, reproached him for restricting the freedom of the church, and appealed to the Holy See. He then left for Rome by little-traveled roads and disguised as a servant, because the emperor wanted to arrest him. He himself took care of his horse at night, helped in the kitchen, and, on one occasion, even cleaned the boots of a servant who asked him to do so. Pope Celestine III, after mature deliberation, declared that St. Albert's election had been valid and confirmed it. However, St. Albert could not take possession of his see upon his return, for Lotarius had taken possession of it, and besides, Archbishop Bruno of Cologne, who was already old and ill, did not dare to consecrate him for fear of the emperor. Pope Celestine, foreseeing this, authorized Archbishop William of Reims to consecrate and ordain St. Albert in his diocese. While the saint was in Reims, news reached the city that the emperor had gone to Liège to exterminate St. Albert and his supporters. St. Albert's uncle wanted to leave with a group of nobles to confront the emperor and defend the rights of his nephew, but the latter, who had a higher idea of the duties of a Christian, preferred to remain in exile to avoid war. In the meantime, the emperor took severe measures against the clergy of Liège, forced the supporters of St. Albert to submit, and left for Maastricht, where he hatched a new plan. On November 24th, 1192, after almost 10 weeks in Reims, St. Albert went to visit the abbey of St. Remigius. Outside the walls, certain German knights who were waiting for him in a very narrow passage killed him. The whole city shuddered with horror. St. Albert was buried with great honors in the cathedral. Emperor Henry had to do penance. Lotarius was excommunicated and was forced to flee. The history of the saint's relics is interesting. Indeed, in 1612, his alleged relics were transferred from Reims to the church of the Carmelite convent in Brussels. On that occasion, Pope Paul V granted a Mass and an office of St. Albert to all the churches of Brussels and to the Cathedral of Reims. In 1919, when the Reims Cathedral was cleared of rubble after the German bombings, the supposed tomb of Odalric, a 10th century archbishop, was opened. The contents intrigued the authorities, who appointed a commission of clergymen, archaeologists, and physicians to study the remains. In 1921, the commission unanimously declared that the skeleton in Odilrico's tomb was that of Saint Albert of Louvain, and that the relics transferred to Brussels in 1612 were those of Odilrico. In response to the request of a Belgian member of the commission who wanted the metropolitan chapter of Reims to fulfill the promise it had made 3 centuries earlier to send the relics of St. Albert to Belgium, Bishop Neveu, auxiliary bishop of Reims, said that he could not give a definitive answer at the moment, but that in his opinion, solemn promises were not simply useless papers. For his part, Cardinal Mercier, Archbishop of Mechelen, after gathering all the scattered portions of Odalric's remains, sent them back to Reims. On November 18, 1921, Cardinal Louen, Archbishop of Reims, delivered the true relics of St. Albert to Bishop van Kouwenberg and Dom Sebastian Brown, OSB, whom the Primate of Belgium had commissioned to receive them. An important relic of the saint was separated from the rest and sent to Reims.